All right, let's dive into two really complex and, frankly, often confused dynamics that show up in family conflicts: coercive control and parental alienation. On the surface, they can look so similar, but digging in and understanding how they're fundamentally different, well, it's absolutely critical for everyone involved. Let's get right into it.
It really all boils down to this one single gut-wrenching question. When a child starts to pull away or even completely rejects a parent, what's really going on? Is it a totally justified response to some kind of harm, or is it the outcome of a hidden, deliberate manipulation? Getting that answer wrong can have consequences that last a lifetime. The stakes really couldn't be any higher.
So, to even begin to understand the difference, we have to look at the core mission of each one. This isn't just about a list of different behaviors. We're talking about two entirely different goals. One is all about domination, and the other is all about indoctrination.
I want you to think about these as two completely distinct architectures of trauma. Coercive control, that's the architecture of domination. The primary target, the primary goal, is to control an adult partner. Parental alienation, on the other hand, is the architecture of indoctrination. The goal there is to completely manipulate a child's mind against their other parent. And that one distinction, it's the foundation for everything else we're going to talk about.
So, let's tackle coercive control first. This isn't just a bad argument or a nasty fight. No, it's a whole system. It's a deliberate, calculated strategy designed to slowly and systematically dismantle a person's independence, their freedom, their very sense of self. The source material describes it perfectly as a form of non-physical captivity. So how's it done? It's done by building what some call a control matrix, using all these different tactics at once. The abuser might control who you're allowed to see, they might monitor your phone and email, cut off your access to money, and even use the court system itself as a weapon. You see, no single tactic tells the whole story. It's the way they all interlock that creates this invisible cage.
Okay, now let's switch gears and look at that other architecture: parental alienation. This is a process of psychological indoctrination, and it's aimed squarely at a child. The goal is to systematically rewrite the child's entire reality, their memories, their beliefs, their emotional bonds, until they reject a parent who they previously loved. The process is often compared to cult recruitment, and honestly, that's a pretty powerful way to think about it.
And this isn't something that happens overnight. No way. It unfolds in stages. It starts small, just planting little seeds of doubt. Then it becomes about rewarding the child for siding with them, creating this fused we-against-them identity. And then comes the really crucial part: actively rewriting the past, telling the child that their good memories were actually bad ones. By the time you get to the final stage, the rejection is so baked in that the child truly believes it was their own idea all along.
And this brings us to what might be the single most important distinction we have to make. If a parent is genuinely abusive, if they're unsafe, if they've caused real harm, a child's rejection is not alienation. It's called estrangement, and it's a healthy, protective response. Alienation, by its very definition, is an unjustified rejection. That is the absolute key. Okay, so we've seen what these dynamics look like from the outside. Now let's go a little deeper. Let's peel back the layers and look at the internal, psychological machinery that makes these architectures actually work. Let's put them right next to each other. In coercive control, the core dynamic is learned helplessness and trauma bonding. The victim is always on high alert, just trying to avoid punishment, and their own identity slowly gets erased. In alienation, the child gets enmeshed with one parent and starts splitting, seeing the world in pure black and white. One parent is all good, the other is all bad. Their own identity gets hijacked and replaced by the parent's story. And of course, in both of these situations, children are so often caught right in the middle. But the developmental damage they end up suffering is actually quite different depending on which of these architectures they're trapped inside. Think about a child growing up in a coercively controlled home. They learn that the world is a fundamentally dangerous and unpredictable place. They're always on edge, hypervigilant, constantly scanning for threats. They often become what we call parentified, meaning they take on the role of the emotional caretaker for the adults, learning that their main job is just to keep the peace and manage the abuser's moods. Now, for the alienated child, it's a whole different kind of wound. Their core struggle is an impossible loyalty conflict. It basically forces them to perform a kind of psychological amputation, to cut off half of their own identity just to please the parent they depend on. They lose that crucial ability to hold two feelings at once, to love a parent but also be mad at them. And this can lead to just profound guilt and regret later in life.
So given how different these two dynamics are, why on earth did the very systems that are supposed to protect families, like the courts, get it so disastrously wrong so often?
Well, this is where things get really, really complicated.
Here is the great paradox that so many professionals miss. The coercively controlling parent can show up in court looking calm, logical, totally reasonable. And why not? They're in control. Meanwhile, the victim, they are often an emotional wreck. They seem reactive, maybe even unstable. But what they're actually showing are the classic effects of trauma. And the system completely misreads the signals. It mistakes the abuser's calm for credibility and the victim's trauma for instability.
And that one crucial misunderstanding leads to this whole cascade of devastating mistakes. The court might label a situation of clear one-sided abuse as high conflict, as if both people are equally to blame. They'll get bogged down in a single incident instead of seeing the long-term pattern. And maybe worst of all, they might mislabel a protective parent's very legitimate fear for their child's safety as alienation.
So the big question is, how do we get this right? How can we do better? Well, the source material actually provides a pretty clear forensic toolkit, a set of diagnostic questions that can help us cut through all the noise.
For coercive control, the very first question is all about the pattern. Are we seeing domination across multiple areas of life, financially, socially, legally? Remember that control matrix we talked about? This is where you look for it.
Question number 2 gets right at the tactic of institutional manipulation. Is one parent filing motion after motion, not because they're seeking justice, but because they want to harass, punish, and financially bleed the other person dry? Using the system as the form of abuse, that's a massive red flag for coercive control.
Now, when we're trying to spot parental alienation, the first key question is about the quality of the child's reasoning. Do their reasons for rejecting a parent sound, well, do they sound trivial or rehearsed? Do they use adult language that a kid wouldn't normally use? This kind of thing points away from an authentic problem and more towards indoctrination.
And this one is so critical. You have to ask, what was the relationship like before the conflict blew up? If the child had a warm, loving, positive relationship with the parent they now refuse to see, that strongly suggests some external forces come in and poison that bond.
Look, if you take away only one thing from this entire explainer, please let it be this. In the chaos and the emotion of a family conflict, do not get lost in the details of a single event. You have to zoom out. You have to look for the pattern of behavior over time.
And that really brings us to our final critical question. When you're looking at a family in crisis, are you just seeing the latest incident, the cracked wall, the broken window? Or can you step back far enough to see the entire architecture of trauma that was built piece by piece over months or even years? Because finding the answer to that question, well, it can change absolutely everything.